Good morning. I think it's an important opportunity now to talk to you about what's happening in Bali. Most of us are hearing a lot about what's happening in the rest of the world. We know what's going on in Britain, in America, in Australia, in New Zealand. But there's been very little press about what's happening in Bali. So here's the situation. Our tourism industry is completely closed down. 80%, which means 80% of our economy is inactive. It also means the other 20%, which of course relies on the tourism, is equally impacted. So we've got a catastrophic economic situation, and this is in a country with no safety net. So it's very, very serious. This has led to a situation of poverty and hunger. And in the south of Bali, where there's still quite a lot of population, the Balinese and the local expats, including Rory, have stepped in and have been very helpful with providing food. Restaurants have given cooked meals. Restaurants who are closed otherwise have given cooked meals, and food's being distributed. The north is much more difficult. In remote areas, not just the north, remote areas are much more difficult because people don't have the infrastructure to do the distributions. Fortunately, Bali Children Foundation does. So with Tom's support and my friends and members of the Bali Hope team, we've raised money and have started distributions. The fundraising has been successful, and we've raised enough funds to cover about 500 families with a month's food. We hope that this will be sufficient because we believe by the end of May, early June, the national government will have stepped in and started replacing that aid. Unfortunately, it takes a while for them to get stuff together. But the key thing is, for now, we're looking after those families. We're dealing with it in a very orderly way, in a socially distanced way, all of those things. It's been a very successful campaign, and I think you've seen videos about it. So thank you for that. It's been successful. Of course, we're not just doing North Bali, we're doing the villages at the bottom of Mount Agorm who were impacted by that disaster a couple of years ago, and we're also doing all of Lembongan and Cheningan. So the areas that you've been involved with supporting are the areas we look after. Now we've got a new problem. Like the West, there's been much debate about getting the kids back to school. Do the kids go back to school? When do they go back to school? All of those issues. Finally, it's been decided here that the kids will go back to school in early July. Now, that's not such a disaster as it sounds, because school normally starts mid-July. So while our schools have been closed since the 16th of March, particularly for the senior kids, it's really only been the last part of their semesters because they'd actually done their exams in mid-March. So for the senior kids, it hasn't been such a mess. And we were all in lockdown, no one could do anything about it. So going back to school in July makes sense, and that's great. The only problem is that because of the massive poverty we now have on our hands, getting kids back to school is going to be a huge problem. So we've got 8,800 students we interact with on the Bali Children Foundation program. Of those, about 1,200 are on scholarship. And those students I'm not so worried about, because we already fund half their education fees, and where the parents need more help, and many of them will, we know those families and we'll be able to step in and assist. So that's not the bigger problem. The bigger problem is what we would normally call the middle class. The middle class here have been devastated by this closing of the economy. People who are paying off houses, a couple of motorbikes, a car, whatever, are now in a situation with no income. Now, they do have savings, but their savings might last them, 3 months, 4, 2. Our economy is going to be locked down for 1 to 2 years minimum, and it won't recover to its real capacity probably late 2023. So these families are deeply at risk in terms of their children's education. They're aspirational, they want their kids to be educated, but they won't have the funds to get them back to school. We want to be able to step in July and help those students get back to school and stay in school and don't drop out. So this means we need to raise funds to do it. We will be focusing on the areas we operate in, which is North Bali, Songan, West Bali, Lombongan and Channingown. That's where we'll be looking, and we'll be watching out for families who we know are at risk of having their kids drop out. The families don't want the kids to drop out. We don't want the kids to drop out. The government doesn't want the kids to drop out, but it's going to happen just through sheer economic necessity. So Tom has come to me, and we've been talking about what's happening in Bali. I've explained to him the problem with education and the need to get the kids back to school so that they don't drop out and waste all the investment that's gone into them to date. And he and you have agreed to help us raise funds towards this with the challenge on May 30th, which, by the way, I'm going to join in on. Don't laugh. So the plan is to raise money, and Tom will talk more about that and how we're going to do it and what it's going to look like. From my side, not only will I be part of the challenge and fundraising, but we'll be getting the message out into the communities that we want to hear about families who are in distress, and particularly students in junior and senior high school. The primary kids will be okay, but junior and senior, because the schools are really close to the houses, kids can walk, they can get to school, and the fees are low. The only thing we have to do there is think about uniform, shoes and things like that, which kind of we can manage. But junior and senior high school, particularly senior high school, is deeply expensive, and no way are the parents going to be able to afford it. We need to build a fighting fund to keep these kids in school. Now, this is a fighting fund for July. It is not a fighting fund for next January, which is the next semester, or the year after. It is for now, because I believe the government, as usual, will come to the party. It's just they take a while to do it. They're a bit slow. And with 265 million people and massive problems with infection, that's very easy to understand. So we need to step in now. I'm asking you to please help us solve this problem. Why it's important is the Bali Hope people have already built great economic opportunities for Indonesia through education. You've been doing it through your events over the last period since 2018, and you've made really big impact. So let's not blink at this point, the point when we need to get back in there and really dig in and get this job done. Ask you to help us do it, and please interact with what Tom's got in mind, and let's all work together to solve this problem. I will be deeply grateful, the children will be deeply grateful, and Bali will be deeply grateful. Thank you.